Welcome to Buffaloed. This is the pilot episode. I am Owen Reeder. I'm joined here by JJ Shiplet, Christopher Primo, and Matt Peterson. And today we're diving into the conversation that we've all been having for the last several years, probably longer than that, around what is the West's role in Canada and what does it mean to be Western Canadian. And the show doesn't take a hardline stance on the future of the geography. I think what we are interested in is hearing the stories, hearing the engaging in conversations, and understanding the history behind this region and behind kind of trying to uncover and discover what it is that makes us unique or makes this place unique. What is it that draws people to it or keeps people away from it, based on the values, the climate, the work, the people, all of that kind of stuff. So this is it. This is the first time we're actually rolling cameras when we have this conversation. I'm excited to be here with you guys. You guys want to do like a little intro of yourselves?
Sure.
Sure. Go ahead.
I'm JJ. I'm a musician and artist from Calgary. I've lived here since 2004. I was born in Alberta, spent some time in Manitoba, even spent some time in Ontario. And but I've been out here since 04, and this is home for me. Married a Calgary girl, got a little boy.
Nice.
This is home.
Cool.
So I think that's why I'm interested in this conversation.
I'm Chris Primo. Charity leader, worked in Calgary my whole career. Leader of the Impact Society. We produce and implement social emotional learning programs in schools in Alberta, across Canada. My whole focus in life is really to help young people unlock their purpose, find their strengths, find their support systems and their values, and live for something beyond themselves and have them engage in society. The future generation is going to build the nation that we dream of, and to equip them with those things is so important. I was born in Toronto, Scarborough, actually. I'm a Laurentian. I guess I'm the only Laurentian here at the table. Not a Laurentian elite, but my mom's family's from Kingston and goes back many generations. Southern Ontario settlers actually was what came up on the DNA test my uncle took. So go way back on that front. And then my dad's from Montreal, and his family's, my last name is Primo, and it's an old Quebecois name that's been around since the 1500s. And I definitely have roots in Eastern Canada, and moved here in 1999 to high school, and been here ever since. Traveled the world, but really this is where I want to make my stand. This is where my children are born. This is where I met my wife, who's also from Toronto. But at the end of the day, I think that Alberta, just geographically and historically, is Canadian. It's the latest, greatest place where Canada came to find a new way to not just settle, but to find solace, a nation of nations. And that's what I'm here to talk about today. Is not about the separation issue per se. I think that's an unfortunate side effect if we don't get this right. But I see Canada as a real light to the nations in terms of this ability that we've had for hundreds of years to be a nation of nations, to be many people on one land. And that's what I'm here to talk about.
Nice.
I'm Matt Peterson. I'm born and raised in Calgary, and I like the Alberta entrepreneurial spirit, and I think that's what I want to kind of promote. I think Alberta is the best place in Canada, and we're unique, and I've always sort of felt Alberta first. I've never even been to Toronto. Like I don't even know what life is like out there, but seen a lot of the world, but just not out east. And I don't know, I feel like Alberta's sort of singled out these days, and I feel like all four of my grandparents were born in Alberta. Like there's like some homesteaders on one side and like just long history, and I feel like we've got the right values here and we got to stand up for them, because they're not necessarily jiving with the shared values of Quebec and some of those Eastern Laurentian elites.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, so I think if people like talk trash about like Calgary not having culture, I feel like our culture is why people single us out. It's like it's the opinion that people have out east of us. Like how is that are we not unique in that sense? Like,
Mhm.
isn't that culture? I don't know. So interesting conversation to have.
Yeah, I from my background, I was born on the West Coast and immediately moved to Calgary. So I've spent my whole life in this city and raising my kids here too. I consider Alberta home. This is where I take my stand for my family too, in the same sense. And yeah, I would echo what you say. Like culture's a funny thing. It's a word that gets thrown around pretty easily, but it would be one that I'd say most people would be slow to define. It's a difficult word to sort of uh, uh, create a encompassing definition around, and I think one of the motivations for me, I think more recently in this show, is actually not even the election result in the federal election. It was something that I heard in the aftermath of the federal election. I'm just going to pull it up. This is the
Oh no,
what's
Yves Blanchette, the bloc leader.
For the people in Alberta who want to separate, do you have any tips for them on how to actually get the job done?
Our success so far does not place me in a position to give them tips about what to do, but I could give them tips about what not to do, not now. The first idea is to define oneself as a nation. Therefore, it requires a culture of their own. And I am not certain that oil and gas qualify to define a culture. But it's there.
So this is maybe I'll just redo that
decide
intro. That the rest
they
of it's
want
kind of
to-
nonsense. But it was. I think I got excited to have this conversation, or I got motivated to have this conversation after seeing the bloc leader at a press conference question the cultural identity of Alberta, and basically summarizing it down to, I'm not sure that oil and gas is a culture, and I think that is a illuminating statement. I think it probably says more about how the East looks at the West and how they look at our role in terms of the overall shape of our country. But I also challenge it as just generally false. Like I don't think of oil and gas when I think of Alberta. That's not the common thread that I see through the people that live here. It's not the common thread that I see through the people who move here from Ontario. And there's many people who are moving here. Alberta, I think last month had, or maybe it was the first quarter of the year, had something like 22,000 more increase in population, and every other province in the country had a decrease in population. We are the most, in terms of inside of Canada, the most immigrated to place. We're one of the most fastest growing geographic areas in the world right now. And so if that's just oil and gas, then I think we would there would be more oil flowing. I don't think that those people come here just because of oil and gas. I do think that they come here because of opportunity. I think they come here because they're following a sibling, a brother, a family member, or something like that who's come here and has found opportunity, has found a fit for themselves. And generally, I think my feeling is that idea of what Western Canada or Alberta culture is located in that sort of shared motivation that those people have to come here, as well as that shared value set that has kept the population here, like your grandparents settling and their parents settling in Alberta, 100 years ago, and those kinds of things. Like the values that they had when they came, very similar to the values of the people that are coming from Ontario or the East Coast, or wherever it might be, to come and live here in Alberta.
I think it's important also with a clip like that with Yves Blanchette, however you say his name, is that we have to remember what he's fighting for and what he's looking at. I think too often we get caught up in the opinion
Sure.
of others, and we fail to recognize that like that is completely irrelevant to who we are. He is fighting for separation in Quebec.
Mm-hmm.
So he hates Alberta in the
Based
first
on
place.
French culture, and
Yeah.
preserving language and all that. Yeah.
So the thing that and ultimately the thing that he misses there is that culture needs support. And I know we have to probably define what culture means and what we're actually trying to piece together. And that's what we're trying to do here. But culture needs support, especially as somebody in the arts. The only way I'm able to have a career in Calgary is because of oil and gas. And I can shit all over the oil and gas industry as everybody in the music industry does. Or I can recognize it like it is what's helped me pay my bills when I got to go play a private show for your company or your company. It's not because you guys just have tons of money. It's because your clients are involved in oil and gas. And so that has to be something that like he can say that we don't have a culture or that oil and gas aren't a culture, but oil and gas are what help propel culture in the same way that Quebec has lots of money for these types of things, and they produce a ton of culture. Yeah. But they also got the money for it.
So like if you think 150 years ago, like Alberta was created in 1905.
Yep.
People were here before that, but not very many. Like not much was going on back then.
Right.
And now we're almost 5 million, and everybody comes here for jobs, for opportunity,
Right.
because we have everything you could ask for. We got coal and mining and agriculture and oil and gas. Like there's a lot in those two words, oil and gas, too.
Yeah.
Like it's the job, the opportunity that people came for first, and then once people lived here and settled, then you need roads, then you need schools, then you need hospitals. But it's really like the opportunity is here first. And I think we're like such a new place. We're pretty unique in the world. Like there wasn't,
in the grand scheme of things,
people
like,
weren't here for hundreds or thousands of years. And that's after the opportunity kind of left, like the fishery shutting down or something out east, like people stay. And that's where the culture, I think, really kind of progresses. And what I think our culture is that everybody came here for somewhat the same reason, and that it's like attracted people of a like mind in that sense.
Yeah, I would say even like from the earliest days, like the original settlers that pushed westward were pushing westward for a more expansive idea of freedom, a more egalitarian way of living, a more make your own future, the ability to kind of carve your own space out and succeed or fail, but by your own efforts, not by a class system that was essentially transplanted into upper and lower Canada, when we settled the continent.
I find like comments like that incredibly dismissive, and we've heard it elsewhere. I think it was John McCain who referred to Russia as a gas station back in the 2008 election, and ignoring the culture and dismissing them down to their raw ingredient doesn't play well, and it doesn't serve the person who says it, nor does it bring Alberta on side. Imagine if someone from Alberta or Danielle Smith was to say that Quebec's not a culture. Quebec is the St. Lawrence River, maple syrup, and a language. Like that's incredibly dismissive, ignorant, and doesn't show leadership. It doesn't show how can we work together to create a better federation here in Canada. The whole concept of Canada was based around two solitudes. Nations that had been here 300 years before Confederation, French and English. They had their wars, they had their fights, but they decided to try something new in terms of we're going to be two distinct nations sharing a nation of nations, if you will, that was full of different immigrants at that time. And this was the way that they saw it working. Now you fast forward, and I believe it was between 1998 and 2006, and now a lot of time has passed since then. The largest migration of human beings in Canadian history was from the east to Alberta in that time. And that has continued for the last 20 years since. And I think that speaks to culture. Yeah, there's oil and gas, but it's not like, hey, like I never wake up in the morning being like, yeah, it's good to be part of an oil and gas culture. I wake up almost every day knowing that I live in a tomorrow culture.
Yeah.
That's why people come here. They come here because there's a hope for tomorrow beyond our present circumstances. Right. That's why they came in boats, they came on planes, they came however they
on
could.
Wagons, on horses,
Exactly.
100%.
They're coming to they see what Canada represents.
Yeah.
And they see there's a new opportunity to be part of that next chapter of the Canadian story as individuals and in a community, and that's culture. Like you think about what is culture, it's the same thing as identity for an individual, but it's an amalgamation of history and peoples and families and communities that share strengths, sure, oil and gas, but it's not oil and gas. It's I'm ready to work hard. I have the ability to work hard. And I believe that by working hard, I can provide a better future for my family and a better future for my grandchildren, you know? It's a set of values of we are a nation of nations. We respect diversity, respect new people coming in. We're accommodating, we're good neighbors. We not just have that as a value for ourselves, but we value the systems and the people around us, whether it's the neighbor who just moved in from Eastern Canada or from Bangladesh, or it's the value that we place on going to the cultural festivals that we have, whether they're historic like the Stampede or modern, you know, like all the different ethnic festivals that happen on a regular basis. And I think that's something that we're missing is this understanding of what made Canada such a great nation to begin with. Is this concept of two solitudes. When you
The
expand,
mosaic, right?
yeah, the two solitudes and the mosaic came as a, okay, how do we now, it's not just French and English, it's Irish and German and Ukrainian and Russian and, you know, South Asian and Chinese. And we've brought all these nations here with this concept. I think there's cognitive dissonance around this because Canada stands for this mosaic, yet here in Alberta, we're still treated as the weird cousin who's just there to supply versus actually having a seat at the table. So,
We
yeah,
should be accepting and
I think Mr. Blanchette is not just being dismissive. I think he's being intentionally dismissive in a way that I don't think helps his base, to be honest.
But it fuels them.
Yeah.
Because his base is anti-Canada.
Yeah.
Well, you know, maybe anti-Canada might not be the right way to put it, but his base is pro-independent Quebec. And so anywhere he can tear down, and I mean, we could probably go through so much social media and find him saying stupid shit. You know what I mean? About Ontario, about Eastern
True
Canada.
about me too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
That's pretty true with all of it.
So I think he does do a lot of good for Alberta just in the how hard he fights against government overreach, like federal
Yep.
government overreach. Like his work
I like
in
that
that
I like that the
category
bloc
alone
exists.
is so good for Alberta.
Yeah, especially in this current parliament, and ultimately, in this parliament, I think that's what'll tear it down, is that the Bloc and and Conservatives are going to end up finding a lot more common ground.
Yeah,
than they
theoretically.
expect.
I love the energy industry. I think it's the greatest thing. It's probably the best industry in the world, period, in terms of like free market. Like it's at least here, it's a free market. There's so much space for people to come in. There are thousands upon thousands of entrepreneurial endeavors that seek to innovate for the industry. And like we don't spend nearly enough time marveling at the fact that it's minus 35 out and you can press a button in your home and more natural gas is pumped out of the ground in a like a storage well into the pipeline system, into the network, into Calgary, and firing up your furnace so that you don't freeze to death in January or February. Like it's incredibly complex. It's an incredible feat of innovation, technology, entrepreneurship, grit, just like hard work. So like if that was our culture, I would say great. It's awesome. But what I actually believe is that the true spectacle of the Canadian energy industry is actually downstream of the culture of Western Canada. I think that it's because of Western Canadian culture that we're able to see that kind of environmental responsibility, open opportunity for people to participate, the distribution of it in an effective and safe and on-demand manner. Like that stuff is downstream of people getting their heads together and saying, hey, what if we did it like this? Hey, what if we worked together to try to do this? What if we partnered? What if we did that? Like that's the spirit of the West to me, is there's one part of it, which is that motivation saying, kind of on the individual basis, I'm going to make something for myself here in the West. And there's another part of it that's like, there's no way I could do it alone. I was talking to a guy the other day and he was explaining how, I think it was his grandparents, so this would have been in the early 1900s, moved to Alberta, and on Christmas Eve, they're frying donuts in their house, and the oil catches fire and it burns their cabin down. And so it's December 24th and you're homeless on the prairies. You're dead. You're dead in any circumstance. But they were taken in by their neighbor and they lived with their neighbor for the entire winter. Think about like two families. It's already small to think about living in a house that's like 400 square feet with bunks against the wall and a stove over here. Now double the amount of family members that are in that house.
Every family had 8 kids.
Every family had to have 8 kids. And so that there's like that independent spirit that I think is a really cool and integral component of Western culture. But there's this absolute like unyielding cooperation that exists here that I don't, if we didn't have that, this place would be empty. And I think you could look at places like Russia and see a huge empty expanse of difficult places to live, and they're still empty. And they're empty because they lack some of that ingredient that we had out here that allowed us to push westward into what is essentially, for at least 6 months of the year, largely inhospitable.
The reward part of taking that risk, like there's got to be a payoff if you're going to come and break unbroken land and make a farm. Like it's
Totally. Like
a lot of deferred reward, like
yeah.
years of work before you get the payoff. I think that's kind of built into Alberta too.
Yeah,
or
I
any
agree.
tough place to live.
It is a tough place. It would have been like 1,000 times harder
100 years.
100 years ago.
Yeah.
So let's maybe, I like to, I
Especially in a
think,
place that had no trees. How do you survive the winter with no wood?
oh yeah, I don't know how they did. Well, yeah. Or how do you like clear the brush so you can plant a crop? Like think about like how
Breaking the
much,
land was
Oh, man.
serious work.
it's hard to imagine it now because it's all broken and you drive down the highway and you see these beautiful fields all divided into half mile by half mile sections, like, or quarter sections. And like back in the day, it was like brush, willows, like
And
aspen,
sand
cosmos,
boulders just underneath the soil everywhere.
yeah, everywhere. Every time you sink a shovel, you hit a rock. Yeah, crazy. It's crazy. Maybe what we could do is from each of our perspective, just kind of say, what do you, JJ, from the viewpoint of an artist, a musician, and a creator in this, in our economy and in our culture out here, how do you see music reflecting uniquely in the West, or the art scene reflecting uniquely in the West in terms of our culture?
I think that there's, and I'm sure it's something that we'll touch upon as we go here. There's when it comes to music in the West, like as I said, like I firmly believe that like it's because of the industry and because of the innovation and the work ethic of so many before me, I'm able to make music a career. Here, most artists in Alberta have, if they're after a career, have left. Now in this monoculture that we live in with the internet, you just have to be in Nashville. There's no question about it. There's nowhere else. Like there's other places you could go. Sure, you could go to Memphis, you can go to LA, but LA's moved to Nashville. Everybody's there. The music industry is a hub there as a monoculture. I never really had anybody ever say to me that like I could create a career here and this would be the route you would go. It's just me been trying to find it. But there are people who are in Alberta and in Western Canada who have created careers both in Western Canada and beyond that represent Albertans. They represent Western Canadians. I think about like, I'm sure you guys have all been to a Core Blund show because these always playing around. But you think about a Core Blund show, the amount of people that get up there and he starts singing about the roughest neck around and all these sort of like Western Canadian ideas, ranching, farming. I mean, his biggest song's about getting his truck stuck, right? And all his buddies coming around and trying to help him get. And it's like we all know those types of guys who are doing that type of thing. But then you go to a Core Blund show, and it's always packed with people who sing every single lyric.
Yeah,
and there's a sense of pride that comes over them. And I've felt that same pride myself when I go to it. And I think that that's one of the things that draws me as an artist to be like, hey, like how does this get furthered? How does this get grown? How does this get fed? so that we can have more of this. And there are other artists. I mean, like, Coulter Wall from Saskatchewan, but he's living in Saskatchewan and he ranches in Saskatchewan, and then he goes and tours the world. So there are people who are invested in our culture and in telling our stories. That's the way I often view it as an artist. Like, my job, I think, without going back to, but I think like this whole monoculture thing is such a distraction for artists. And I think that a large part of it I've learned is that it's about me telling stories. And that's what art is supposed to do. It's supposed to tell stories. It's supposed to bring you a deeper understanding, a deeper connection between one another. Not just be this thing that you're trying to get famous off of, because that actually doesn't help any of us tell the story. And we do it. I, as an artist, do a disservice to us and to Western Canadians when I'm not telling our stories and singing about our stuff, and not afraid to do it. Not afraid to be like, hey, this is a song that maybe won't be a #1 single for you, but it tells a story of the Primos hopping on a train and coming up to Alberta and landing in Alberta in 1906, whatever your family came over here, and forged the land and made it happen.
Yeah.
I think telling those stories is art's job. And not that it's its only job, but it's one of its main pillars.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that there are Albertans and there are Western Canadians that do that really well. It's become a way different ball game when it comes to actually making a living off of it, but there are people who are committed to telling those stories. And even I think about there's a girl from Southern Alberta named Nolene Hoffman who is exploding on the world stage right now. And she's exploding with a song called Purple Gas. Which is like, it's not a Western Canadian thing, obviously, but like that's a thing that most Western Canadian, if you've ever been on a farm in your life before, you understand. So I think that art has I have a responsibility as an artist to tell the story. And when we get too caught up trying to seek fame and attention, we do a disservice to all of us as Western Canadians. And I don't think, I know that stretches further than just art.
And further than just Western Canada too. I think that's true of any area. I think there's as people kind of attract themselves or attach themselves to the monoculture, I think there is this undermining that occurs in terms of the unique local cultures. Like, there are local cultures across the United States. It's different in Texas than it is in Portland. Like, those are just different groups of people. They behave different. They speak different.
And a guy like Cor Blunt and Coulter Wall can go from Alberta into Montana, into Utah, and all the way down to New Mexico and Texas, right? Like, their careers all span that Midwest.
Yeah.
Because those people are not too different than a lot of people in Alberta and in Western Canada. Like, if you think about, I've often thought about this, like somebody living in northern Idaho. There's that little sliver of Idaho that connects with the Canadian border right above Creston. Yeah. Like, the people who live on that side of Idaho aren't living there because they're like, oh man, we want to live next to the Canadian border. They're living there because they want to be away from the world. Like, they're trying to get away from
like most people in Creston.
Yeah. So I think that, like, this is part of it. And I think that, like, we have to have the artists have to tell the story and have to be willing to tell the story.
Yeah, I agree. And find the stories.
And
celebrate.
And we also need the support. Yes. We need the support, which is, again, like taking it back to oil and gas. I know it's just not oil and gas, but we need the support. Artists need the ability I need the ability to wake up every morning and to be able to work on this and to be able to try and bring these stories together in an entertaining way, in a positive way, or in an enlightening way.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Chris, what about you from like a civic perspective, a public life perspective? How do you see, whether it's the organizations that live here that seek to serve the population, or just like even when you think about how our governance is established and that kind of thing, like what do you see from a civic perspective that makes the West unique?
Yeah. Well, I really like what JJ said in terms of telling the story, and really that's been a bit of my MO throughout my career, is to share the story and invite everyone to be a part of it. How do you make this story your own? It's not to copy that, not to fake it till you make it, but to take the values, take the message in that story and embody it with your own strengths and your own values and in your own community. I think that what I see different here in Alberta, and actually Preston Manning is one of my heroes, and I think someone who's done a lot to really help vocalize what we all know, what we all see if we've grown up here, if we live here, that Alberta culture, and he talks a lot about doing something, and not just do something, but to like get involved. Like if you see a problem, address it. If you see a rock under the ground and you're trying to till the soil, do something about it. And one of the core, themes of Impact Society that I see as a commonality across Alberta and Western Canadian culture, actually Western culture. Let's be honest. I think the so-called American dream is something that we all share. And in the Midwest here, in the Western, east side of the Rockies in this continent, it's the newest version of that is really here to brave the wild and establish something that can last for generations, that is free and prosperous, connected, and lives up to that ideal of we can forge our own path forward. But it's that whole message to me of like, we got to till the soil first. We got to get rid of those rocks. We got to break the land, so to speak, in order to have a place for those seeds to land and flourish and for a culture to thrive. You need to get rid of some of these tough stuff. And we're not afraid to address that from our current premier, addressing some of these underlying issues in Confederation, not to try and separate, but to know that if we don't get our seat at the table, if we don't tell our story and embody that and do something about it, we're going to fail and we're going to be overcome and we're going to lose those things, those values and those strengths and that opportunity that we all came here for. Mm-hmm. So when I look at not just our work at Impact Society, I look at different organizations out here. Some of them are federal organizations, but are embodying that Alberta spirit. Canadian Mental Health Association, Alberta, for instance, just merged. They merged. Like charities don't usually merge. That's a weird thing. Like there's no shareholders, yada, yada, yada. They just merged with suicide prevention. Why? Well, because together they're able to get to the underlying issues through education, awareness, and community engagement, and actually systematically work from the bottom up to address the most severe consequence of a mental health issue or a crisis, which is suicide. And that to me speaks to that ethos of the house burning down. What do you do when your house burns down on Christmas Eve? Well, you got neighbors. You got people who care about you. You have a home, even if your house has burnt to the ground. Because your home is the land, it's the people, it's the community. Mm-hmm. So I think how we're doing it maybe not so different, because I think we're throwing it back to what made democracy and Western civilization what it is. And I don't think that's anything to be ashamed of. I think that's the thing that got us here, and it's the only thing that's going to keep us going. Mm-hmm. And it's an opportunity for other nations to understand what we were able to do by promoting community engagement from an early age. It's not just learning about the past, it's now doing something about the present based on what you've just learned in your social studies program or in your health and life skills program. So I really think at the end of the day, what's unique about Alberta on a civic engagement level is its culture. I think it comes back to that we all know that, like, it's not that, oh, my kid will never be prime minister. Yeah, our kid can be prime minister. We might have to learn French on the way, but we all have an opportunity here to lead in our own way, to shape the future on our own way and empower them. And especially in the education system, this is where it's so important for, I think, parents to be involved, for communities to be involved, to not just drop the kids off at school and let the school handle it, but to be engaged in that community on an active level to ensure that not just the kids are all right. Like, so much of what I see across the country, across the world, is this game of whack-a-mole. We're chasing this symptom and this symptom and this symptom. But if we get back to that ideal, not just that ideal, that necessity that your grandparents came here and had to till the soil and get under the surface in order to make sure that the future was better. Mm-hmm. They weren't just addressing the surface level issues. We're getting down and under, and everybody was a part of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what I see across the sector in Edmonton, in Calgary, and in our political leadership as well. One last thing is the Alberta recovery model is something that has been a big part of in terms of just advocacy. I worked in mental health and addictions with homeless youth for many years, and getting ahead of the curve has always been my passion. And we have an opioid epidemic. We have more homeless people living on the streets, slowly dying. And Alberta has taken a stand to do something about it and intervene in a collective way that not just remedies the issue, not just gives them somewhere else to go, but actually goes and helps address one person at a time, one community at a time, the underlying issues, like of the recovery centers they've established, the majority of them are in Indigenous communities. Why? Well, because A, they're the ones who seem to be the most hard hit by this, but also they're the ones crying out saying, hey, let's work together to get under the surface, not just treat symptoms, not just do open injection sites or more methadone clinics, but actually let's bring them together into their own communities, because that's where healing can happen. And I think that speaks again to Alberta's culture and also what makes us unique in civic engagement. Think about Preston Manning, for instance, okay? Back in the 80s, the Reform Party, which then became the alliance that then led to Stephen Harper becoming one of the best prime ministers we've ever had, started with 5 people, most of them Albertan, saying, hey, if no one else is going to do something, the 5 of us are not just going to sit on the sidelines. We're just going to try. We're going to do our best. And look what happened.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I love that. The story of that sort of trajectory through starting in Calgary, right? Like it was like one conversation in Calgary that led to town halls across Western Canada and into Ontario, and then all of a sudden, forming an actual functional government. 10 years later, like a 10-year progression or whatever. I think that's a uniquely. I love what Preston says about that when he's like, this gives me hope for Canada. You couldn't do that in the United States. 5 people couldn't get together in a room. 5, essentially not nobodies, but 5 individuals couldn't get together in a room in the United States and 10 years later be the president of the country. Like it's not set up in such a way that you could demonstrate entrepreneurial initiative in politics, but Canada uniquely is. I think in our current state, it's still possible to have that kind of influence.
And I think that speaks to Canada at our core. It wasn't the Revolution Party. It wasn't the let's change this whole thing. Let's throw let's turn over the monopoly board. It's let's reform it. Let's get back to what our core value was.
Yeah.
That 2 solaces needs to expand. The mosaic needs to be fully understood. And we need to get back to our core values as a society. And I do see Alberta on every level leading that charge.
Yeah.
Tax reform. That's the reform party we need right now.
Yeah, tax
It's ridiculous.
Tax revolt party. Something you said, I think I'm going to toss it to you, Matt, but I love what you're saying about your grandparents had to till the soil, they had to pull the rocks out of the ground. They had to make it usable, make the land worth something more than it was, knowing that their payoff wasn't for them. They weren't going to extend to riches. They weren't going to go on cruise. There were no cruises to go on. There was no vacation they could fly away to, vacation home or something like that. Like they put their roots down. They did the work. That kind of mentality only happens when you have that. Your objective is to serve the future generation, the generation that's underneath of you, whether it's your kids, whether it's the younger generation that you see around you in your community and that kind of thing. I'm not saying that that's exclusively Western, but I do believe that sort of
built in,
that future mindset, that sacrifice today for tomorrow is a mindset that is a common thread in Western Canada. You work with a ton of entrepreneurs, you work with a lot of business owners, you work with a lot of, you're just connected to a bunch of influential business folks in Alberta. Like, what do you see from that sort of entrepreneurial initiative perspective that makes it unique out here?
I think that willingness to put in the hard time and the work and be focused is definitely a part of our DNA here. But I think adventure is number one. Like, the reward is not what it's all about either. It's the journey. It's the live fast, play hard, or work hard, play hard. I think that's built into it too. Like, we really do enjoy our rivers and our mountains and all that. Like, how many golf courses does Alberta have per capita? I think probably as many as anywhere else in the world. Like, there's both those things. You got to enjoy your life as you go. Like, I think we're a very positive. Albertans they see opportunity everywhere, and it's a positive outlook that you don't contrast it to, I don't know, Birmingham, UK, or some city that has 1,000 years of culture, and the opportunity kind of has diminished, I guess. Like, people don't see a lot of hope. I think that's the complete opposite of where we're at.
Why Birmingham?
I don't know.
Okay.
Never been there.
Watching
It just
Blinders, right?
seems
Yeah.
smoggy.
Deep in Peaky Blinders.
Yeah, like well, and I don't know if it's Birmingham or not, but like the coal industry is like in the UK is a great example where like there was a lot of communities that flourished, grew, built homes, built families, schools, and roads, and all that stuff, all off of the coal industry to try to fuel the country through the industrial revolution over there, and they were prosperous places until coal fell out of fashion, and as we've continued in particular in London or in the UK, like turn away from fossil fuels and those kinds of things, you do see a lack of hope in some of those communities. I don't know if it's Birmingham or not, but there are entire cities that are kind of left listless and purposeless, which is a terrible place to be.
Well, like how scared people are in like Windsor and like
Around the
if
steel
these-
and auto
if
industry.
the auto industry goes away, that's so much of that livelihood in those cities.
And Alberta's always represented, especially to Eastern Canada, Alberta has always represented an opportunity to go and work and make money. You think about the connection between Fort Mac and Newfoundland, and how many people from Newfoundland
Direct
moved.
daily flights to Fort Mac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is like, how did that, that's crazy to think that, like, that's, 4,000 kilometers away from each other.
Mhm.
And a small town in northern Alberta has a direct flight to St. John's, because these communities kind of similarly ended up hopeless.
Mhm.
I shouldn't say that St. John's hopeless. It's not. It's a great city, but the work, it wasn't there for so many generations.
Mhm.
I was on a flight from Moncton back to Calgary, and in the airport in Moncton, 3 of the 5 flights, small airport, that were about to take off, 3 of them, one was Edmonton, one was Calgary, and one was Fort McMurray, and you had mostly middle-aged guys, some with their lobster that they were bringing back to work, and this is the place where they know they can provide that future for their families, and because of wonderful air flights and easy access, they're able to go home, visit their family, and then
Well,
come
because
back
of
for
WestJet,
right?
which is
Absolutely.
Calgary, like
That's true.
story,
Yeah.
like victory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I think that I remember hearing stories, in the 80s, there was a big push to come to Alberta from the east and also from BC as some of the industries collapsed and whatnot. There was an attitude in Alberta that was like, screw you, go home. This is our place. And I don't think I get it. I think I can understand where that comes from, but I don't think that that's the typical posture of the West, at least in Canada. Like,
See, I remember it differently than that, though. I remember Ralph Klein talking about the bums and creeps from out east, but I think once you moved here, you were good to go.
once you moved here, yeah, I think it was kind of the people that were like, there was this attitude of like, you're taking things away, like you're taking it back to the east, or you're removing some sort of wealth or resource from our community. I don't think it's an effective attitude, certainly for growth, but I also think like in the early days in Alberta, we were one of the first, I don't really like the term cultural mosaic. I think it's actually propaganda that's been used to degrade our identity more than anything else. But Alberta and Saskatchewan were like these areas where there was Scandinavians and Eastern Europeans and all these other groups that came to Canada. They kind of skipped over Quebec and Ontario, which was largely just the English and the French kind of from a dominant perspective. And they found a home here and built out here. So we have always been, I'd say, welcoming of other cultures. But it was that idea of like, if you come here and make it your home, welcome to Alberta. You're an Albertan now. And you're like the truest Albertan here generationally, but like Chris is an Albertan too.
Just
like
years.
It's all just years. Yeah. Like there's something about Alberta that is like, there is a welcoming, there's a welcoming spirit here if you are coming to be Albertan. And if you're coming to be not Albertan, I think that's maybe some of what we're feeling locally now is like other cultures coming and trying to bring their culture here. I'm trying to be a bit delicate about this, but
Well, I think you're right.
it's why it's important to me. I think that we have this conversation because it is the culture that will succeed here in the long term. So if we think about what will work for our kids, for their kids, the culture that has built this place is the culture that will keep it going. And so the more that we dilute that, the less we explore it, the less artists are willing to tell those stories, and the less people are willing to listen to those stories, the less unified that culture becomes. And I do believe that puts the area at a risk in the same way that, you know, other geographies have been put at risk by whether it's decreasing industry or whether it's some other force of emigration or immigration, whatever it might be.
Well, I think that one of the things you said that's interesting, or that is part of this, I think, is every culture around the world, every area, geographical location around the world, there are people like us sitting around having this conversation about, like, what does it mean to be where we live now?
Right.
Because what's happened, and I don't mean to bring it up again, but what's happened is that we have a monoculture now.
Correct. Yeah.
The internet has just brought this thing where, like, this is how we all act. This is how everybody should act. This is how you should view the world. And this is the music you should be listening to. This is the movies you should be consuming. These are the things you should be doing with your time. Mm-hmm. And these are the things, I think probably even more alarmingly, these are the things you cannot do.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big issue, is that we have allowed for this monoculture to come in and take over.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're stuck going, who are we?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I'm taking it away from, like, the East Coast, I know, and the Laurentian elites. But I think that people in Ontario and Quebec are asking the same question now. Who are we? What do we stand for?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
You know,
and they should.
Yeah.
Like, I think this conversation that we're having is just as important in Southern Ontario to have as it is to have here, because I think that we do see that degradation of not just how it used to be, but how it has been since the beginning of this nation. Like, it's not just like, oh, that's how it was for your dad. No, it was how it was for his dad, his dad, his dad, his dad. Like, back through generations, there are things that have been unique to this geography, and not just from, like, a pioneer and settler perspective. Like, there are things that are unique here from the people that lived here before we came to till the ground and pick the rocks and break down the brush and make the place more fruitful.
Yeah, and, like, I think about even the story of Wetaskiwin is the place where the Cree and the Blackfoot came together. They'd been fighting back and forth for generations, and in order to survive the changes that were happening, they needed to reconcile. And that's what Tasquin means, is like the place of peace, the place of coming together. And here in Calgary, we have a place where for thousands and thousands of years, right at the crux of the bow and the elbow, people came together from diverse, whether it was the same nation, Blackfoot, coming together, or Cree coming together. That's where they made community. That's where they brought culture from diversity, different perspectives. The whole idea of culture is it needs to germinate. It needs to have time to connect and to grow together in unique ways. And you see all these different things flourish as a result of doing that in the right way. And I think that those nations, the First Nations here, set the precedent for us. That is a great lesson for us to continue to grow with them, for sure, but also for us to learn from, in order to how do we make a path forward as one culture that's brought about by many different cultures, many different identities. Question though that's burning in my mind though is like this Birmingham thing. I don't know if it's Birmingham still, but I think about the Rust Belt, and I think about the ups and downs of our economy, the boom bust cycle, and the economics of Alberta being a land and a place where people can make a future and be entrepreneurial. But like, what are you seeing, Matt, in terms of the difference here? How we're anticipating that it's not always going to be oil and gas, but it's the culture, it's the values, it's the people that are going to make this a place to thrive before, during, and after oil and gas. What are you seeing in the entrepreneurial world and the free market values that give you hope that if tomorrow we find a way to harness the sun and we don't need oil and gas anymore, what do you see in Alberta that's going to ensure that prosperity?
I think Canada's hope is our land. Like, we have resources that can save nations across the world with energy, food, rare
Water.
minerals, water. Like,
Mhm.
I think if we focus on like not like responsibly developing our land and resources, I do think there's a bright future for oil and gas. Maybe the uses change, but I think we're pretty well covered in terms of like what we have here in Alberta and across the prairies. Like it's the breadbasket. Like we have good land. We have a good growing season, and I think that is like the people. Yeah, Alberta, I've hoped for, but like the worst case scenario in my mind is when kids are coming out of high school looking for their job or what career path. The best option is a government job. That is, in my mind, the worst outcome we could have. And I think in terms of competitiveness and brain drain, the way things are going is we're losing that to the US faster than ever. Like if it was just for career advancement or like money, why would people stay here? I don't know. But I think we do have that egalitarian like foundation that is different than the US. And we do have a lot of opportunities, but I think it's kind of resource first.
Yeah, everything's down.
And that can branch into a million different things, but I think it's resource first and then everything else comes around that.
Yeah.
It's interesting that the option for like an 18-year-old dude coming out of school right now is a government job. Because I think about like
You should all be terrified by that.
yeah, for sure. When I came out of high school, I think well, I think part of it is it's like this is why we need a military, like a strong military, not because we need to protect our borders for war.
Because we got to whip those young men into shape.
I know, but like I would have been coming out of high school, I would have been a prime candidate of a guy who needed some instruction, some routine,
Some adventure.
and I could have gotten it if that was an option. And in America, that would be an option. But here, it's like I'm not going to join the military. You dumb. So we all need structure. We all four of us know that in our lives. We come from very different things, but we all know that structure is a thing.
Yeah,
and that's what a military gives a lot of people is an option to learn how to wake up in the morning and make their bed and then go to work.
Yeah. So here's what this show is going to look like over the coming months, coming years, hopefully. We're going to divide and conquer a little bit. We're going to go and take on the question of what does it mean to be Western Canadian? What is Western Canadian culture? And we're going to look at it from a few different angles. We're going to look at it from the arts angles.
Yep.
We're going to look at it from a civic angle. We're going to look at it from an entrepreneurial angle. And we're each going to take that on different conversations with different folks from different backgrounds that all have something to say, something to contribute to the conversation about what does it mean to be Western Canadian. And like I know for me personally, I'm really excited to learn more about our history. I love hearing these stories about people who have triumphed over adversity in this place. I'm a big fan of the outdoors. I'm a big fan of the wild spaces that are still left to us out here, and so I'm excited to hear stories about people who have confronted that wilderness and made civilization out of it. But I've got the last question maybe for each of you would be what are you most curious about or most excited about to engage in this conversation over the coming months?
Yeah, I think all those things. I think Alberta history is very interesting and very hard to find. Like I was at a family reunion last summer and found this like old scrapbook that a family member had made, and it was like you don't hear much about Alberta in the 20s and 30s, I don't think. Like 1947, found oil and all that, and then that's kind of like what kickstarted everything. But that history and like hearing the stories like the Manning family from the start, like I don't know, that's like I want to explore that, but and I think that's where Alberta culture starts really. Like I think that'll be fun, and how we kind of distinguish ourselves. Like yeah, let's put some stakes in the ground. Like, this is Alberta.
Mhm.
I think that's important. That'll be fun to do too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's the stories, and where's the access between history and living it out, and it's the term heritage. And so by using those stories, bringing those stories back to the forefront is not just about a blast from the past. Let's remember how things used to be, but it's by remembering how things were, the struggles, the triumphs, the coming together, that we're able to now repeat those stories in our own way. And so what I'm looking forward to is being able to, take those stories and present them in a way for not just Albertans, not just Western Canadians, but all of Canada. I think there's going to be stories about how how we got here before Alberta. 1906 was not that long ago,
Mm-hmm.
but in the 1500s is really when this all started. And some of those stories are not just good stories, but those are the examples that we can then translate to the audience, to the listeners, and bring into our own lives. They're going to help us navigate the future.
Mhm.
And to me, it's not just about remembering, it's now about embodying the things that got us here,
Yeah.
because that's what's going to help us get to that next step.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Agreed.
I think most of my career has been me traveling around Western Canada. Like my career extends into Ontario and Eastern Canada, and I go there and people come to the shows, but I make my living off traveling around Western Canada. And I don't I think that for a large part of my career I was kind of like was wanting something totally different, something more.
Hmm.
Now I look upon it, I'm like, oh, actually, these are I'm going to return to Grand Prairie. I'm going to be in Fort St. John again. I'm going to be in Lethbridge again.
Yeah,
I'm going to
nice.
be in Cranbrook again. Like, I go to these towns once a year and I play for them and people come. I'm going back,
Mm-hmm.
And I think the thing for me with this is that I go, and me and you were dreaming up some stuff a couple weeks back, and it got me excited thinking about, like, I just like to go around Alberta, Western Canada, hearing the songs, talking to the artists.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of dreaming up an idea where, like, maybe I'm not or all of us aren't always just sitting right here having a conversation,
Mm-hmm.
but we're actually actively out there telling these stories
Mhm.
and singing these songs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing I get most excited about in this conversation is it's like, I want to go up to Fort Mac and find the singer-songwriters up there and the musicians up there and the
Mhm.
people telling the stories, young and old,
Mm-hmm.
and have a conversation with them
Mm-hmm.
and sing a song with them,
Yeah.
because I want to go back there.
Yeah.
And like, these are the people that, like, even like a couple weeks ago, I was playing a show in Ponoka. And after the show, the guy, he was like, man, we got to push the show up. There's an Oilers Stanley Cup final game happening. We got to push the show up a couple hours. So we did. And everybody still came, whatever. And then afterwards, I was in his garage, and there's maybe like 80 people in his garage. And it's all Central Albertans cheering on the Oilers.
Hmm.
And I was like, I took a photo of it, and I was like, man, like, this is just a garage of good people. Everybody brought food. Everybody was in a positive attitude.
Yeah.
And everybody was like there as a community. And I thought to myself, like, my job in that moment was to sing them a song. And I did it.
Yeah.
Well, more or less, sing them a bunch of songs. But I'm excited about that opportunity for us to, like, for me as an artist, to kind of put my feet down a little bit more and be like, hey, this is where I'm from. And these are the stories we're telling. And I want to, I think something that you said earlier on about young people, it's like, I want to build the infrastructure and the path so that there's artists, maybe one of your guys' kids, who decide to take up music and they go, hey, this is an actual option for me.
Mm.
I can pick up a guitar or I can play the piano and I can actually sing songs and tell our stories and further it. And there'll be infrastructure for them to be able to build a career or something in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'm excited about it. It feels like a school project that I would have avoided when I was in like grade school. But like as an adult who cares about what this place looks like for my kids' sake, I'm excited to explore these stories. I'm excited to do it with you guys. And yeah, for you who are listening, what you can do is follow, subscribe where you found this. And also comment. Let us know, who do you want us to have conversations with? What are the stories that you think are unique to Alberta, to Western Canada? I will say this isn't just about Alberta. I would say it's, Saskatchewan, BC, Northwest Territories, Yukon, like the whole area of Western Canada has got some common threads that run through it. We're really interested to explore it. So if you have ideas for who we should have on as guests, where we should bring the show when we do take it on the road, all of those kinds of things, comment, follow, shoot us a note. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, we're excited to get this thing started. Buffaloed. That's
Right
a
on.
wrap, boys.
Ciao.